Hi, so this is just a quick video to show you around the software, which is Bramble, and just to give you a little bit more understanding about how websites work and the limitations of the software. So first thing I was going to cover is some of the text that you talked about. Obviously, you can change font sizes to things like italics. You literally can just highlight the fonts and make them italics. You can also change the font to a little bit more of a handwritten one. So with all sites on the internet, you are better to use web-safe fonts, which are all of these that come preloaded with Bramble. A web-safe font basically means whatever device someone's on, whether it's a phone or a tablet or a computer, that font will always display correctly. If you try and pick particularly fonts that you pick through things like Microsoft Word or through PowerPoint, if they're not web-safe fonts, you have to basically bring them in as an image. And that means a few things really. One is that they don't always resize very well for those devices because you're using an image. So text can respond to the size of a screen, and an image is just a fixed pixel width. So it might look great on the computer, and you might then go on your phone, and then all of a sudden that image just shrunk down and it's not as readable. So there's some things to think about with that. And also colors. So for example, everything works in a frame. So you have a frame up here and the text is a preset color over the right here. You have a frame here and that is another separate text frame, and you have a preset color over here. So when you change the color of the whole line. That's just kind of the way that it works. Whereas in PowerPoint, you can highlight this and change the color of just this word, but you notice you can't really do that with the internet. The internet isn't really going to give you the option to do things like that. Everything's a preset box and a line, and the colors are predefined for that entire text box area. So again, I can change the colors, I can bring them in as an image, and then it can look however you want it to look. It's not a problem, but I just thought I'd explain that further in terms of the best sort of practice is to use fonts and not images, but I will do a version with, and you can just obviously see how you feel about that. And also you'll notice there's a slider version for the computer version, there's a slider version for the phone version. So we do have elements that are interchanging with that. In terms of backgrounds and spacing, you can put a lot of space between these. So you could put a huge amount of space. We're talking about spreading out sections. There can be a huge amount of area between them like that to sort of make the page seem less crammed. You can then also change the entire background color of an area. So you could have that background area there white. So then you're sort of the contrast between that color and then the white. You'd obviously then have to go into any text. You may have to then adjust the text. And again, you can spread these areas out as much as you wish to sort of make them feel a bit freer. Talking about the backgrounds of particular boxes, if you're trying to sort of color the background of an entire area, it can be done, but what you'll notice is if I do that, the text is then sitting right on that left edge. So again, it works to a degree, but it isn't necessarily what you would want to do. Whereas in something like PowerPoint, you would just draw a new text box in here. You can't really draw a text box within website software. You're working in these framed areas, and each sentence and line is built up. We were talking before about those framed areas. So you can do other things. You can color the background of just this area. You know, you could have a background color there instead. So there's ways and means that you can make alterations. But I think I was saying to you before, the biggest thing you can do with any website is you do want it to be sort of consistent and to work well on every device. So it's not actually a great idea always to design in something like PowerPoint. You'll notice as well by changing this box, we've now got a box here that then doesn't line up. So things can start to become a little bit messy if you play too much with color boxed areas. So you could obviously go in and tweak this and try and sort that out. But again, the more sort of alterations and shifts and changes and alignments and things that you do, they might look great on one device, and then you pick another device up and it just doesn't really work. So quite often with websites, you're trying to sort of build something that works in terms of the layout, looks okay and works, but there are some sort of limitations within that. But again, you could just color up a box here. You could take that dark blue and you could carry that across to this. You could carry across to that. You could get a layout that looks a little bit different. You know, if you wanted to bring in the lighter, paler color, you could sort of use the background there and have a section like that. Obviously, then the yellow then doesn't work so well, so you'd have to sort of have a think about that. You know, maybe it would be better to leave it white. So yeah, you can just give you an idea of what can and can't be done. There are some rules to web design, whereas there's no rules to Word. There's no rules to PowerPoint because they're built for almost printing and design work. Whereas a website is a much more complex thing because it's got to work on absolutely everybody's device. It's got to reposition and resize. So it has to follow sort of a certain strict set of rules that enable it to do that. So yeah, I just thought I'd show you that. But yeah, there's things that we can change, and I will make some alterations to layouts, and I will send you back some proofs to give you an idea. But I just thought I'd just cover that. I'm just quickly going to exit this without saving and go back in, because what I was going to show you is how the design transfers, because that's obviously quite important for websites as well. So when you're on Bramble, you can actually preview how this looks on other devices, and it will give you a bit of an indication of how the homepage currently would look on a phone and how it would look on a tablet. So up in the preview section here, it will just give us an idea of on a normal size computer what it will look like, which is like this, which we've already seen in the browser. But then it will also give you an idea of the tablet version, how that works and how that looks. So you can see the tablet version, the text is much closer to the edges because of the way it adjusts the frames. These boxes are much closer to the edges. You don't have this sort of void area on the tablet because of the way the browser on the tablet works. So there's lots of layouts where perhaps it doesn't look exactly as you want on the computer, but it's absolutely perfect on the tablets and the phones, which is probably going to make up a majority of your audience anyway. So there is quite a bit of compromise, and you can see it's important that everything sits well and works well in every type of device that you're browsing on. And same with the phones, you're going to get different people using different width phones as well. So for example, on here, the buttons then become huge, which is not really ideal. And then text repositions and things change. The layouts are altering for the device that this person's on. Your standard kind of mobile, everything's fine. So this is most of your mobile devices are going to see this. So you can see nothing's too bad on there. The buttons are repositioning and resizing so they're big enough to be clickable. The fonts are repositioning and resizing so that they fit the edges, but they're still readable as well. So yeah, there is a trade-off. You're often building a site and it's cross-platform. So you're building a version and it's got to be computer compatible, tablet compatible, phone compatible. It's got to be readable and work and look okay on all of those. So there are some sort of limitations and some things you have to follow. And like I say, doing a design on PowerPoint, you're only thinking of PowerPoint, and you can just export a PDF which will look the same for everybody. And with websites, it's not quite the same because there's different devices. There's portrait mode, there's landscape mode, and when the new iPhone's out or the new iPad's out, those sites have to adapt to fit these bigger screens. So you often build a good site is built well so that as new devices come out and the screens get bigger, the site just compromises and copes and adapts and adjusts to those devices automatically. But yeah, I just thought I'd cover that just to give you a bit of an idea. I will do some new homepage proofs and some color mock-ups for you, and those will follow on shortly. Any other questions, just give me a shout.